This is the last class of this quarter and of this study. And before we get too far into it, I just want to say how much I have enjoyed this. I love this subject. I love to study it and read about it and talk about it and teach it. And I hope that it's been helpful to you. I realize that a lot of the things we've talked about have been a little bit challenging, a little bit deep. And I've gone through some of it kind of rapidly, and it may have been hard to follow sometimes. But at the same time, I didn't want to dumb it down just because you're not, 30-year-old adults. I believe you guys have good intelligence and you know how to reason through things and understand what we've been talking about. But it may be that there are some things that were a little challenging and hard to understand, and that you may be interested in studying further, and I hope so. If so, there are many good sources to help your study and help you answer these questions. And I'm always available to help you understand. And I hope to post all these classes. As you know, I've posted all the videos. And I hope to post all these classes that we've been doing in class with the PowerPoint. Take me a little while to compile that and put it all together. But that way they'll be there for reference whenever you want them. All right, for 11 classes, we talked about scientific evidence that supports the Bible. We start with the Bible, and then we study science, because science is often wrong. Scientists are often wrong. How many times have you heard, and we even talked about, scientists are surprised about something. Scientists are stunned or shocked. That's because they don't know it all. And they are continually learning. So we don't need to put our faith and our hope and our trust in scientists or in science. Put our faith and hope and trust in that which is true, and that is the Word of God. Everything that is proven in science will fall right along with the Bible. Science and the Bible are compatible. Not only are they compatible, but the Bible must be true in order for us to be able to conduct science. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but there is a conflict between the two views of creation versus evolution. And as a little bit of a review, we found out that with all this evidence we've studied, scientific evidence that goes right along with the Bible, we cannot just throw the evidence at an evolutionist and expect them to believe and turn away from their sin and turn away from their views and believe in God and creation. Because the evidence does not merely speak for itself. It depends on what your worldview is. You will interpret all evidence based on your worldview, because your worldview wins out in every case. And you filter everything you see and everything you learn through your worldview. The evidence that we've talked about is helpful, and I want you to know those scientific evidences, because they, as I said, they can be pretty confounding to an evolutionist who's never even heard these things. And you might surprise them with some of these evidences the scientific evidences that go right along with the Bible. But the evidence is not decisive. It does turn some hearts, those who are truly honest and seeking truth and don't have a worldview that they will cling to at all costs. But usually the evidence is not decisive in the matter. So therefore, since they are interpreting the evidence through their worldview, we need to challenge their worldview. We are in a battle of worldviews. The Bible puts it this way: calls it a war. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God, for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. 2 Corinthians 10, 3-5. It says that we are in a war and that things exalt themselves against the knowledge of God. So we use these spiritual weapons to cast down those arguments and cast down those things that, those high things that exalt themselves against the knowledge of God. And that's what we are trying to do. We're trying to use spiritual weapons to cast down these false arguments that exalt themselves against God and against His knowledge, the knowledge of God. So, the ultimate proof of creation, anybody remember what it is? If the Bible were not true, it would be impossible to prove anything. That's just a very short, concise sentence that describes the ultimate proof of creation. This one I like even better. Only the Bible can actually account for things the way they are. Can make sense. Only the Bible can make sense of the things that are necessary for knowledge. In order for us to be able to know anything, the universe would have to be the way it is. And it turns out it is the way that the Bible says it is. The Bible puts it this way: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So if we want to know the truth, we need to start with a fear of the Lord. That is the beginning of knowledge. But if we despise that knowledge that comes from the Lord, then God calls us foolish. We are fools because we've despised His truth, His wisdom, His instruction. One of the pillars, or one of the legs in our three-legged stool that supports the ultimate proof of creation is the laws of logic, the universal standards for correct reasoning. And these are universal and have always been and never can change. How did these come about? Only the Bible can account for this. Evolution cannot account for laws of any kind because it's a chance universe. Everything happens by chance. You don't get things that are concrete and universal and unchangeable and never have changed through chaos and through chance. That must come about by something that is true since the beginning. This is laws of logic, which is the correct way of reasoning, are just a reflection of God's thinking, of how He thinks. They flow from Him. It's not that God created laws of logic, because they're just the way He talks, the way He thinks. Everything flows from truth because God is truth. In Colossians 2, verse 3 says, "In Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge." All the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are in Christ. So the Bible can account for laws of logic because the one who was there from the beginning has all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge in Himself. Forever, O Lord, your word is settled in heaven. Forever, that doesn't just point forward and say forever. Forever means both directions, if you will. Forever, your word is true and it's settled in heaven. That's where the laws of logic come from. The Word of God. Jesus Himself is the Word. John 1, verse 14. He is the Word. Now, think about that. Think about the word. How that Jesus is the Word. That's not just a name given to Him. Think about what the word word means. It means a thought, a truth. Jesus is the Word. Jesus is the Word of God. And he is also the truth. John 14, verse 6. Jesus is truth. It's just like if I were to say, well, Ben is not very Ben. Kaylee is not very Kaylee. Well, how can you say that? Because she is 100% Kaylee. Jesus is not truth. Jesus is truth. Not only does he have the truth and speak the truth, he is the epitome, the essence of truth. So that's where the truth comes from. And according to the Bible, the Bible can account for laws of logic. The laws of logic are dependent on the truth of God's Word. Leg number one. Leg number two is the uniformity of nature, as opposed to uniformitarianism. And that is how that nature and science are possible because of God's creation. Creationists can account for the order and the consistency of the universe, that everything is consistent. We talked about how scientists can tell you where Mars will be in 17 years and 3 months and 2 days. Why? Because there is order and consistency in the universe. And only creationists can account for that. How do evolutionists know that it's going to be the same? That there is order and consistency? They can't know that. It's a chance universe. If it's a chance universe, what's to say it's not going to change tomorrow? Everything stays the same because of the promise that we find in the Word of God. The promise is that while the earth remains, things are going to stay the same. God promised that while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. We have God's promise that things will stay the same. When we talked about Jeremiah 33, they talked about the covenant that God made with heaven and earth. With day and night. The covenant that God made with day and night. The evolution worldview maintains that all the order and consistency and predictability in the universe came from a Big Bang, an explosion. An explosion does not bring about order and logic and consistency and predictability. It brings about chaos. So evolutionists cannot account for the uniformity of nature. That is necessary in order to be able to conduct science. It has to be predictable, because when a scientist goes into a lab and does an experiment, he gets a certain result. If he comes back the next day and does the same experiment with the same conditions, what's he going to expect? The same results. Why? Because there is order and consistency in the universe, and God has promised it. So, science is dependent on the Word of God. It is predicated on the truth of God's Word. Leg number 3, morality. Right and wrong make no sense in an atheistic universe. Who decides right and wrong? Well, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. Why? You're using the word shouldn't. You have no way to account for morality. You're borrowing from the Christian worldview. You have no logical foundation for morality. But in attempting to be moral, evolutionists are being inconsistent, and I'm glad they are. Otherwise, the earth, the world would be a lot more chaotic than it actually is. So they must borrow, that is, they must steal from the creation worldview in order to be moral, in order to practice morality, in order to teach morality, or that anybody should do anything. It's predicated. Morality and right and wrong are predicated on the truth of God's Word. And they have no place in an atheistic, amoral universe. We talked about the don't answer, then answer strategy, if you will. Remember where that is found? It's in Proverbs chapter 26. I'd like you to think about that. Remember Proverbs 26. That is a great tool, and Jesus used it all the time. When somebody would challenge him and ask him a question, trying to trap him in his words, he didn't just come right out and answer the question, because he knew their hearts. He knew what they were trying to do. So we can't know their hearts, so we ask a couple of questions to get at the truth of what they're actually doing. Why are they asking this question? Are they struggling with the answer and genuinely concerned or curious? In that case, go right ahead and answer the question. You're wanting to lead them to the truth. But often you will find that they're just trying to trap you. They're just trying to trip you up. And if that's the case, then we might not answer at first. We don't answer the fool according to his folly, or we'll be like him. Do answer the fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. As I said, Jesus used this method over and over in order to confound his enemies. How many times do we read that after he used this method, they turned around and said, okay, we can't trip this guy up, and they would leave him alone and maybe never dare to ask him any more of those silly questions, trying to trip him up. Okay, so that is our quick review. Ooh, it took longer than it should have. Okay, here is what we're talking about in this class. That is fallacious reasoning. I wanted to spend some time on this because they don't really teach logic in schools. And logic is fascinating to me. Logical reasoning, the way that we reason through things, the chain of reasoning. I hear Stephen talking about logic. He'll use some of these logical fallacies from time to time in his sermons. And it just perks up my ears because it's so fascinating to me how people use fallacious reasoning often, including us. Okay? It's not only evolutionists. We often use fallacious reasoning. And that's one reason I'm going over this, so we'll all get these things in our mind and try to see them, try to recognize them, and avoid them. First of all, this is not a logical fallacy, but this is just fallacious reasoning, how we reason through things with fallacious understanding or reasoning. Arbitrariness. Just being arbitrarily asserting something as true without a valid, true foundation or reason for it. A mere opinion is a form of arbitrariness. Children are often arbitrary. They may say, well, there's a monster under the bed. And what do? They cover themselves up, or they hide, or they scream, or whatever. And they are acting on their arbitrary reasoning. But we are not children. We don't need to, we cannot be arbitrary. We cannot be arbitrary in our conversation, or especially in our argumentation and in our discussions. Like evolutionists might be arbitrary. We talked about DNA, how the DNA is information, and information must be traced back to the mind of the sender. Continue tracing it back, and it eventually gets to God. But they might say, well, we know that DNA is information, but there must be some way that new information is formulated in the DNA. There must be some way. It's an unknown mechanism. That's arbitrary. They just made that up. But it comports with their worldview. They want to stick to their worldview, So they use an arbitrary reasoning, which is fallacious reasoning. Or we talk about C14, carbon 14 in diamonds, the hardest substance known to man. And they say they're supposed to be 1 billion years old, but they couldn't be. They couldn't have carbon 14 in them if they were 1 billion years old. So they arbitrarily say there must be some recharging mechanism. There's some way that carbon 14 gets in diamonds, because we know the diamonds are 1 billion to 3 billion years old. We just haven't discovered how it gets in there. That's arbitrary reasoning. They have no foundation for it. Or comets. I don't think we talked about comets, how that comets can only survive a certain length of time. And it's a lot shorter time than they claim the Earth is old. The universe is old. In other words, there should be no comets left. So they have to come up with a rescuing device, arbitrarily say, well, there must be some generator, some comet generator. In fact, they even gave a name. They gave a name to something that there's no proof of. They call it the Oort cloud. And they say, beyond our solar system, there's this Oort cloud that is generating new comets and throwing them out into the orbit around the sun. It's arbitrary, but it's necessary for them to come up with that in order to support their worldview. But it has no foundation, no logic, no foundation in truth or logic. And they need to remember that for every arbitrary claim, there is an equal and opposite arbitrary claim. We don't do those. We don't use arbitrary claims. We are not arbitrary in our, and I'm telling you this, hoping you will adopt this. Do not be arbitrary in your argumentation with people on Bible subjects or on school subjects or on anything that's important. Because for every arbitrary claim, there is an equal and opposite arbitrary claim. All right, the second type of fallacious reasoning is inconsistency. These are the two big ones. Arbitrariness, which is what? Just coming up with something out of the blue without any logical foundation or reason for it. The other one is inconsistency. Now, you know what inconsistency is. It means you do one thing and say another, or you say one thing today and you say a different thing tomorrow. Well, in order to be valid, worldviews must contain no inconsistency. We must be consistent in our reasoning and in our argumentation. But think about behavioral inconsistency. Our actions speak louder than words. Like a college professor will teach his class that humans are just evolved animals. They are rearranged pond scum. They are evolved from apes. And then they go home and he hugs his wife and his children and protects them at all costs, as though they are not evolved pond scum. That's a behavioral inconsistency. Their behavior is not consistent with what they teach or what they say. So call them on that and say, that's inconsistent. Why are you saying one thing and doing something else? You don't really believe that your wife and children are evolved pond scum, or you wouldn't treat them with love and with protection. Behavioral inconsistency. An evolutionist might teach that our actions, what we do, we can't help because it's just a chemical reaction in the brain. It's just a chemical action. It's chemistry. You can't help what you do. And some of them actually believe and teach that. But their behavioral inconsistency is that they will get outraged when somebody does something that they don't like. Well, in order to be consistent, they would have to say, well, he couldn't help it. He couldn't help stealing my car because it's a chemical reaction in his brain. But no, he gets mad. He gets angry because he doesn't really believe that people's actions are just chemical reactions in their brain. It's a behavioral inconsistency. Call them on it and say, why are you getting mad? It's just you teach that People can't help what they do because it's just a chemical reaction in the brain. That's what this guy did who stole your car. An atheist might say, don't force your morality on me. You can't tell me what to do. We went over this one. Y'all seen that one, right? Don't force your morality on me. You can't tell me what to do. It's inconsistent. In other words, I don't want you to force your morality on me. I'm forcing my morality on you. So that is inconsistent. He's just told you what to do in telling you what not to do. In telling you that you can't force your morality on him. So it's inconsistent. Here's one that I think is funny, but it's also serious. A lot of these things are humorous. We see the humor in them, but they're serious too, because people believe this stuff. SETI. This is I don't know if it's a branch of government or not a branch, but a department within the government, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI. And what are they doing? They're searching for extraterrestrial intelligence by searching for radio signals. Now, not just any radio signals, because there are tons of radio signals out in space, and stars give off radio signals. But how do they know if it's generated from intelligence? Because it contains information. So they're looking for radio signals that contain information, because they know that is what is the marker of whether something has intelligence. But DNA has information. Mr. Evolutionist, if you believe that information is a marker of intelligence, why don't you believe that DNA is a marker of intelligence and has an intelligent source? This is the height of inconsistency, when they say one is true but the other is not. Okay, those are two, the arbitrariness and inconsistency. I want you to remember those in your mind, because we cannot argue with those. We cannot use arbitrariness or inconsistency in our reasoning or in our arguments. All right, so we want to talk about some of the logical fallacies. To me, these are very fascinating and interesting, almost fun to talk about and study. A logical fallacy is just an error in the chain of reasoning, where we're reasoning through something, but we hit a snag and we use an error in our way of reasoning. Sometimes these errors, these logical fallacies, can sound good. They can be hard to catch, and therefore they can be persuasive. And that is the bad part about it. And that's what can lead people down the wrong path, is when they sound so good. There are many kinds of logical fallacies. Here's an example. Well, first of all, you have a premise, or let's say a major premise, then a minor premise, and a conclusion. Okay, a major premise, minor premise, conclusion. My major premise: some animals are cats. Is that true? Yes. All dogs are mammals. That's my minor premise. Is that true? Yes. My conclusion: therefore, some dogs are cats. Is that true? No, because that is a logical fallacy. The premises are true, but the conclusion is false, because it used a logical or a fallacy in coming to the conclusion. Okay? Now here's another one. All dogs are mammals. Is that true? Yes. All mammals are reptiles. Therefore, all dogs are reptiles. It might surprise you that this is not a logical fallacy, because a logical fallacy is an error in the chain of reasoning. This chain of reasoning is starting with all dogs are mammals, all mammals are reptiles, therefore all dogs are reptiles. That is a logical flow from the two premises. But what the problem is that the conclusion does not flow. The conclusion does flow from the premises, but one of the premises is false. See, so it can be a logical fallacy, but what you need to do is be able to catch that one of the premises is false. Okay? Therefore, the conclusion is called not false, but unreliable, because it's based on a false premise. All right, so let's talk about some actual logical fallacies. This is one of the most common ones you'll hear. You may not hear the word, reification. It's a reification fallacy. And that is when you apply human characteristics to an abstract idea, something that is not human. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. Well, Mother Nature is a concept. It cannot be fooled. So that is a logical fallacy called reification. But the Bible uses the reification fallacy. And that's fine if it's in poetic language, or even if it's in just everyday conversation. But in order to make an argument, you cannot use reification fallacy. The Bible here in Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament shows his handiwork. Well, the heavens don't say anything where you can hear them. It says day to day they utter speech. They don't literally talk, but what just their being there ought to say something to us. So it's okay to use the reification in just everyday conversation and in poetic language. But it's not acceptable when you're making an argument, especially a formal argument. Here are some examples of reification fallacy. I don't know how it happened, but evolution figured a way out of these problems. Evolution figured it out somehow. Figured a way around these problems. Well, evolution is a concept. It is an abstract idea. It is not human. It cannot figure things out. So that is a logical fallacy when it is used that way. Nature selects. Remember we talked about natural selection? So nature selects individuals that are most fit for their environment, and it kills the rest of them off. Nature is a concept. It's an abstract idea. It cannot select, it cannot do something that is reserved for humans. The evidence speaks for itself. You've heard that all your life. Well, that's a logical fallacy. That's a reification fallacy, because evidence doesn't speak. What have we learned about evidence? It's going to be interpreted through your worldview, or based on what your worldview is. So two people can look at the same evidence and come to different conclusions. So the evidence does not speak for itself. Creationists say X, but science says Y. Well, first of all, science is a concept. Science doesn't say anything. Scientists say something, but many creationists are scientists, and many scientists are creationists, but that's a different argument. So anyway, here's a reification fallacy. That is applying human characteristics to something that is not human, that is abstract. All right, the equivocation fallacy. Very common. A subtle shift in the meaning of words, like practice makes perfect. Doctors practice medicine, therefore doctors must be perfect. Well, that's an equivocation on the word practice. They're changing they're shifting the meaning of the word practice there. It doesn't mean the same thing all the way through that argument. Creationists deny evolution, but we see evolution happening every day. Things are always changing, so it's absurd for creationists to deny evolution. They are changing the word, or equivocating on the word evolution. Yeah, we believe in evolution. Of course things change. Dogs change into other dogs, other kinds of dogs, but they're always dogs. So they are using microevolution in an effort to prove macroevolution. They're changing the meaning of the word in the middle of their sentence. All right, here's another one, another logical fallacy, the bifurcation fallacy, the false dilemma, or the either-or fallacy. And that is a falsely assuming that there are only two choices. There are only two options. Bifurcation, bi meaning two. The traffic light is either red or green. That's an easy example. Well, no, it might be yellow. So you can't say either or there. That's a bifurcation fallacy. Bob will either go to college or he will move to Tennessee. He might go to Tennessee and go to college. So there's another option. You live by faith, but I'm rational. That's a bifurcation fallacy. I live by faith and I am rational. In fact, it requires the Bible to be true in order to be rational. Rational thought emanates from the truth of the Word of God. Jesus said, "He who is not for me is against me," or "he who is not with me is against me." Either or. Is that a bifurcation fallacy? No, it is not. Because there are only two choices in that case. Some things have more than two options, but some things do only have two options. It's important to know the difference so you know whether it's bifurcation or not. All right, then there is another logical fallacy called begging the question. You've probably heard people say, that begs the question. And what that means is that you make you lay out your premise, and then you give a conclusion, but your conclusion is the same thing as your premise. It's circular reasoning. The conclusion of an argument is incorporated in the premises. Such as, we know evolution is true because it's scientific fact. You haven't proven a thing. All you've done is restated your premise. Your conclusion is based on in your premise. It's incorporated in your premise. Or this one, we know evolution is true because the only alternative, which is creation, is clearly impossible. You haven't proven a thing. All you've done is restated your premise in your conclusion. Miracles are impossible because they would violate the laws of nature. Well, that's not proper thinking, because miracles do violate the laws of nature, and they are true. So our response to begging the question, where people use circular reasoning, is you've simply asserted what you're trying to prove. Do you have a logical reason for your conclusion, or only your arbitrary assertion? Okay, call them on it. Okay. The question begging epithet. Okay, that's where they use biased language, like calling people names and such, to support their conclusion that is not actually proven. The evil murderer viciously killed the innocent victim. That's biased language in order to try to give a conclusion or draw people to a conclusion when it's not logically proven. So you can't do that in logical arguments. Skip that one. Science versus creationism. Science versus creationism. An ism is a dogma or a doctrine or a belief system, but it's not necessarily based in truth. So science, they're calling, this is science, this is truth, versus some silly belief system, by putting the word creationism on there. That's a question-begging epithet. You have not proven your point that creation is just a belief system. That author teaches creation, but the best scientists teach evolution. See, that author is not one of the best scientists. That's a question-begging epithet. You have not proven your conclusion. I hope you'll have an epiphany and stop misleading people to believe in nonsense and lies. Okay? That is just biased language in order to try to draw people to or try to trip you up, try to support their conclusion, which is unproven. They'll use words like, that's ignorant, you're using ignorance, you're dishonest, you're living in the dark ages, you're a flat earther, you just believe in the flat earth. If anybody with half a brain would, etc., etc., that's a myth. It's just a myth. All that is biased language. Step back. When somebody says that kind of stuff to you, don't lash out. Don't come back and say, no, it's not. No, it's not. Step back. Calmly say, I'm sorry, did you have a logical argument? Did you have a rational or scientific argument? When somebody uses biased language in order to try to get people on their side or to support their logically unproven conclusion, step back and say, I'm sorry, I'd like to hear a scientific argument. I'd like to hear a biblical argument if you're talking about the Bible. Do you have a logical or scientific argument, or are you just going to be using epithetical language? The faulty appeal. Now, this is one that Christians might be guilty of. An argument that a claim is true simply because a certain person or a group of people said that it's true. This is a logical fallacy. According to scientists, what scientists? You haven't proven anything. You're using a faulty appeal. You're appealing to scientists as though every scientist say the same thing. Experts tell us that, or according to studies, you need to cite your study. You need to cite your experts. Don't just say experts and say, therefore, you're wrong because you disagree with the experts. Or Stephen Hawking says this. Or name your favorite evolutionist says this. In John 7, verse 47, have any of the rulers or the Pharisees believed on him, believed on Jesus? In other words, they are appealing to a faulty appeal to the rulers or the Pharisees. We haven't believed in him, so therefore that proves Jesus is not true. Jesus is false. It's a faulty appeal. They were using logical, fallacious reasoning. An argument should be based and evaluated on its own argument. It's on its own merit, not on the people who make it. But like I said, we can be guilty of this fallacy. We might hear somebody say, well, Irvin Lee said this. Irvin Lee believes this. Or my preacher says this. And, that's a faulty appeal. The majority of preachers say this, or the majority of churches practice that. That's a faulty appeal. What does the Bible say? So we need to be careful about falling into the trap of using logical fallacies ourselves. No true Scotsman fallacy. This is one that Stephen has mentioned in his sermon. The no true Scotsman fallacy. And it works something like this. No Scotsman puts, I can't do Scottish accent. No Scotsman puts sugar in his porridge. Well, somebody says, well, Angus is a Scotsman and he puts sugar in his porridge. Well, no true Scotsman puts sugar in his porridge. In other words, he makes a statement and somebody argues against it. And he says, well, no true Scotsman does that. That's the no true Scotsman fallacy. Such as, no scientist believes in creation. Well, first of all, that's a false statement. Well, actually, many scientists do believe in creation, just as the Bible says. Well, yeah, but no real scientist believes in creation. Okay. Tell you what, we're going to quit. Because I think we're about to hear a knock on the door. But I appreciate it very much. I've enjoyed it so much. And I'm sorry it's coming to an end. But I hope that it's been beneficial to you. And I hope you'll continue studying. There's so much more that we could have said. Like I said, a lot of this is based on this book entitled, The Ultimate Proof of Creation by Jason Lyle. A denominational teacher, yes, but what he says about creation, I believe, and all these things about the ultimate proof and logic and reason is true. So if you read any of these books by denominational teachers, be aware of who they are and have your guard up in case they say something that is false. So, our conclusion: God is the source of all knowledge, morality, and uniformity in nature. The evidence favors creation, that is, according to our worldview. Okay? It doesn't according to their worldview. But I urge you to know these scientific facts that we've been talking about. Many scientific facts, and many that we haven't had a chance to go over, because there are just so many. Many scientific facts support creation. So science and creation are compatible. In fact, science would not be possible if the Bible were not true. That's one thing I've been wanting to teach, and especially in these last 4 classes. Science would not be possible if the Bible were not true. But evidence alone will not convince most people, so we must challenge their worldview. All other worldviews have a false premise, or they have a false conclusion, and they are self-refuting, whereas the biblical worldview is self-attesting. It is true, it proves itself. Defending the Christian worldview gives God the glory, and that's why we do it. Always, though, with meekness and fear, or with gentleness and respect. And always remember that the power of salvation, God's power to salvation, is the gospel. So always be ready to teach the gospel, defend it, defend the truth of God's word, whether it has to do with creation or any other subject.